When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to this edition of There Can Only Be One, the podcast that puts together the all-star best-of playlist of your favorite bands and artists, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. There is a band out there that lives and dies by their touring and their phenomenal discography. And today we're going to talk about them. That is the one and only Halestorm. And here to join me to go down this road, making his return back to the show, Carson Elko is back. Carson, how you doing, man?
Well, you could say that I missed the misery of It's Not That Bad and I wound up here. So I'm doing excellently. No, I'm so hyped to get underway for this inaugural debut on this side of things. So we'll rock and roll it. No pun intended.
Now, it's true, because most of our listeners are used to hearing you talk about movies and then subjecting yourself to misery on Grading on a Curve. But now we got you on the music podcast. But we're not done there yet, because to quote Halestorm themselves, 2 is better than 1 and 3 is better than 2. So here to join us, making this a trifecta of picks for this episode, my lovely wife, Carrie. Carrie, how are you doing today?
I'm great. And I guess I'm here to get vicious?
Yes, and yes, and yes.
Keep it rolling. I love that.
Into the wildlife. I don't know, vicious seemed to work better. Hi.
Works for me, works for everybody. All right, so let me explain what we are about to do. We're about to go through the entire Halestorm discography. That is 11 studio albums. It should be noted that we are, as always, not covering live albums, and we are not covering compilations. So, for the record, we are not covering the One and Done EP. Yes, some of the songs were precursors to what would end up on their major label studio album, but it is a live album, so we're not covering it. Also, we're not covering anything that was only released as a single. So there's no new album yet, but there is a new single out there. It's a duet with I Prevail, and they're touring with I Prevail this summer. The song is called Can You See Me in the Dark? So we can't talk about that about that song. Maybe that will be a future episode. But by the way, they are on the road this summer with I Prevail, and then this fall throughout Canada with both Evanescence and The Warning. So if you're out there and you're looking for some really good live music, you have multiple chances to catch Halestorm. But we start our journey in 1997. Now, dear listeners, you're sitting there going, whoa. Their debut album came out in 2009. Aha! Their major label debut came out in 2009. Forecast for the Future was released in 1997 on cassette. Now, it should be noted that at this point in time, Lizzie Hale is 14 years old and RJ Hale is 11 years old, and on bass is their dad, Roger Hale. So Carson, it's your first There Can Only Be One. Forecast for the Future. What did you go with?
So I was just as you were doing, probably digging through the past of Halestorm in general and seeing what I was able to dig up and finding out that their dad was not only their bassist, but their bassist until 2003. So he had a good 7-year run with them. And I think it's a cool family dynamic to have. But another interesting little tidbit before we get into it is that these guys were considered a Christian rock band before 2001. That's how they kind of marketed themselves, and that's how they, presented themselves during live sets. And I thought that was absolutely wild, especially as we get into the later selections and how much of a twist I feel that takes. But for my first selection here from Forecast for the Future is Love is Power. And I think it's just the one that hooked me the most. Like, I think going back to their original starting points, it's so different from where we are now. And it's just polar opposite. And I mean, it's 90s when it starts off with a heavy synthesizer beat. And I mean, sometimes that's just what you want. So a little bit out of direction, but still I feel like a solid song that got my juices flowing as I was starting the list.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up kind of like that early kind of Christian rock kind of classification, because yes, they did tour around and they would do like, I guess, school concerts and preach, not preach, but sing about, good morals and all that kind of stuff, which is really, really cool. But the fact that you got a dad who's encouraging music at that age, which for the record, to our two children, if you do decide to start a band, I will play bass for you. That should be put out there right now. I will play bass for our children. But Carrie, off of Forecast for the Future, it's not a long cassette, and you can find it on YouTube. This is one of the albums that will not be represented in the Spotify playlist when you go to our website at notthatbadcast.com to check out the playlist, because it ain't on Spotify. But Carrie, Forecast for the Future, what's your pick?
I chose Why. I thought it was a pretty song.
Mm-hmm.
Lyrically, it was just a really pretty, like, I don't know, maybe the formation of the song. It really struck me. So I went with Why.
Yeah, you're spot on in the fact that the songwriting, even early on, is there. And yes, for a 14-year-old and 11-year-old to have a cassette out there and to have some decent songs, I mean, that is a massive, massive, like, notch in the belt. Like, that's really cool. I ended up going with Light in the Dark because the songwriting was there, but I had Will on my short list. So I feel like we've kind of almost covered that entire cassette. Good early signs for what was to come.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
We now move on to Don't Mess with the Time Man, released on Worldview Records in 1999. This one is on Spotify, so you will be able to get to hear the songs that we are talking about. So, Carrie, over to you. Don't Mess with the Time Man. What have you got?
I got No Clue. No, I picked No Clue. It's a jazzy number. I thought it was a really cool song. Yeah,
I do really like the bass work that Roger Hale put on that song. It is my pick as well. And it's funny because when you hear, the later stuff and you hear like the roaring rock that comes out in it, but to the same token as well, when you get to those covers EPs, and we will get to those covers EPs, and you hear like the different genres and you hear like the different influences that they draw from, it makes sense that you're going to have earlier stuff that does kind of cross over genres. So Carson, we got 2 picks for No Clue off of Don't Mess with the Time Man. What's on your list?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not making it 3, but I am going with the album's name. I'm going with The Time Man. And when I ran through all the songs in this album, not only do you see almost like a small age jump, like you see that difference from the 97 year of Forecast of the Future to the 99 of Don't Mess with the Time Man. And I think it bodes well for a future endeavor. And why I chose The Time Man is I'm a big Aerosmith guy, and I love the reference at the start to Love in an Elevator. And that kind of hooked me off the bat, especially for kids at this point that are 16 and 13 and 99 now. To, hold kind of what we now classify as a brilliant classic rock band and kind of pay some homage to that young, kind of as a testament to me of how high they can go in the future, especially looking at it from the lens of 1999. And this is when I, in particular, start to hear that little bit of definition in Lizzie Hale's voice and just that little bit of stylistic change, like start to ever so slightly step up and turn. But it's still 90s AF as I have in my notes.
You know what's funny? You mentioned Love in an Elevator as classic rock, and I'm starting to feel old. But when you realize that you have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old putting together an album, and at that point, correct me if I'm wrong, when Permanent Vacation had come out, I think it was 87. So yeah, that would have been a 12-year-old album even at that time. So yeah, I guess it kind of is. And yes, I'm kind of old, so I guess we're there.
Sorry, I have it right on vinyl, so I'll be with you in spirit.
Right, I'll just go put it on my 8-track, I guess. Here we go. Breaking the Silence, a self-released album released in 2001. You can find this one also on YouTube as well. And we start to hear The Rock coming out. So it's a bit of a drastic change from the earlier two albums. So Carson, off of Breaking the Silence, what did you go with?
I went with Unbreakable Silences. And that's honestly, I feel like for me, this is the smallest jump in between the albums until we get into a later one. Like this very much you could tell was just 2 years later. I found there's not a whole lot of stylistic change from the previous, but I think I got to kind of understand more of an age period in Unbreakable Silences, specifically as a song, and kind of the developmentally speaking and just mental aspect of now later teens, early adults, especially coming from Lizzie Hale's vocals. And I found specifically you start to get that hint of grunge, like early 2000s grunge. And it kind of melted together nicely for me. So like even though these first three albums we went through aren't even really well known, I'd say, to the public at this point, they're still like, it's just such a really cool audio visual timeline to see their growth, especially from starting out so young and being as successful as they would be.
Yeah, no, that early 2000s post-grunge kind of feel really was dominating the airwaves. And really anyone just has to go back and, watch the Woodstock 99 documentary and you kind of get a feel for how things were musically. I also went with Unbreakable Promises because it is a phenomenal song. And really you are hearing Lizzie's voice start to mature into what it is about to become once they get onto the major labels. I also had Shout It Out on my short list. But Carrie, off of Breaking the Silence, what did you go with?
I'm going to go in another direction and I'm going to choose Rose in December.
Ooh, how come?
Well, wasn't it so great? I don't know. It just stood out to me. It was, I listened through maybe twice and I'm like, okay, which one am I going to pick? And then I kept going back to it. It just had that draw.
Moving on now to their major label debut, the self-titled Halestorm album. We now get to the Halestorm that we're familiar with. Lizzie Hale, RJ Hale, Joe Hottinger, and Josh Smith. The album was released April 28th, 2009, hit number 40 in the US and number 11 on the US rock charts, and it is gold in the States. There were 4 singles off of this one. I Get Off peaked the highest, hitting number 6 on the US mainstream rock charts. I'm going to start this one here because I need to tell everyone that my shortlist is almost the entire album, it feels like, because this album really is front to back. I even have Tell Me Where It Hurts off of the deluxe edition on my shortlist because Halestorm is known for putting out deluxe editions, and there are some killer songs. If you were to take all the songs off of their deluxe editions, like the extra ones that came out, you could make an entire new album and it would be like one of the best albums out there.
I was just saying it'd be a masterpiece, to be quite honest.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing. My pick off of this is one that probably doesn't get played as much as, in my personal opinion, it should. And that's Better Sorry Than Safe. So I decided to take a look at setlist.fm to see how many times this song has been played live. Now I want to put it into perspective here. The most played song on setlist.fm from Halestorm from their tours is I Get Off, played at the time of research 1,308 times. Better Sorry Than Safe has only been played, according to setlist.fm, 129 times. So very, very underrepresented in their set list. And I get that it's not a single, and I get that sometimes you got to play what the radio plays as well, because that's what the audience wants to hear. But, dear Lizzie Hale and RJ and Joe and Josh, when you come to Toronto, when you're playing with I Prevail, if Better Sorry Than Safe happens to make the set list, I might be a happy camper, because holy crap, Lizzie's voice on this song is freaking peak. And I love the pre-chorus in this. Like I have said it before, I'm a sucker for a pre-chorus. Better Sorry Than Safe sold it for me. Carrie, off of their self-titled major label debut, what did you go with?
I chose A Familiar Taste of Poison because lyrically it's harsh, but it is still such a pretty song. The presentation of it is...
It's a good story too.
It's so beautiful. Yet, yeah, hard, beautiful, sad, angry. I don't know. It's all the emotion.
Yeah, and it gets played a lot live as well. Like that seems to be one of their live favorites. And you really can't go wrong with anything off of this. Although funny enough, I actually did not have that on my short list. That was one of the few songs off this album I didn't have on my short list. I had I Get Off, Bet You Wish You Had Me Back, Innocence, Love, Hate, Heartbreak, and Tell Me Where It Hurts. So basically I had an album. Carson, off of the Halestorm self-titled album, what'd you go with?
All right. Well, if no one is, I'll be the basic bitch here, and I'll go with I Get Off. Like it's. I know it's such an easy answer, but this was the turn that they were just waiting for to happen. It's exactly what I've come to want from Halestorm, and I love that it kind of kicked off their big label debut. It's in my mind just the perfect representation of how they work best. Lizzie Hale has such incredibly strong vocal ability that when she's belting it, just take me away. Absolutely stunning. And I mean, this is where they almost found that puzzle piece too to finish off, I feel like, the true backbone of their band. And I Get Off is just such a perfect example of them coming to their own for me.
Yeah, and they do have an early version of that on the One and Done EP, so we get to talk about it here as well, which is good. And by the way, if you want to see I Get Off live, Halestorm did release onto YouTube and onto streaming platforms live at Wembley, and their performance of I Get Off on that live concert, holy crap. But that's also a really, really good way for you guys to get ready to go see them live if you get a chance to go see them on tour. Phenomenal presentation.
Please send me tickets. 555 Street Drive, Canada.
We now move on to something a little different. The Reanimate, the Covers EP, released March 22nd, 2011, hit number 20 on the US hard rock charts. And, you know, speaking as an Alice in Chains fan, I love when bands put out EPs in between major studio albums. I mean, that's how we got Sap. That's how we got Jar of Flies. Halestorm started this tradition of putting out covers EPs in between their albums. And holy crap, did they get off to a good start off of this one. So, Carrie, off of the first Reanimate Covers EP, what's on your list?
I couldn't help myself. I had to choose Hunger Strike. Just, if anything, from the chili bumps that it brought. It was so good.
That's a bold song to cover too. Like,
I know
the fact that you're not only trying to do Chris Cornell, but you're also trying to do Eddie Vedder. And the fact that Lizzie Hale can do like all of it and it comes across so well. Like it's a song that really goes over live too, like phenomenally. Carson, off the Covers EP, what have you got?
First off, I don't know if there's anyone that I personally experienced as an artist that actually does covers better than Halestorm, especially going for like the rock genre. Like they're absolutely incredible. But for me, I love me some Lady Gaga. So I went with Bad Romance. I like my notes here. I mean, how can you not love this song? And it's such a great twist on it. And I feel like no one's really done a cover of it that I can really think of. And I did some digging and some, I guess, like lower tiered people to some up and coming artists. But I mean, you just twisted into an absolute banger of a song. Not that it wasn't before, but how could, like, you built on something that was already brilliant. And then you just added a whole different vibe to it. And that's exactly what you want in a cover. And I can play each of them back to back and have no issues with it.
I mean, I can only really think of one other band that does Bad Romance live as a cover, and that's Ever the Bridesmaid, which is my band. But I'm just putting it out there.
Nice.
I'm just putting it out there. Exactly.
And it's probably a better version too. Let's not sugarcoat this.
Yeah, take that, Halestorm. Bad Romance is on my short list, and I have to say that there are often times, and I say this being in a cover band, there are often times when a song comes out and you're like, I'd love to do this song live, but the studio version, like the original version, would be hard to translate when you don't have a certain instrumentation. Like you don't have keyboards, you don't have sampling, you don't have the production value of a Lady Gaga studio album. And then Halestorm comes along and they rock the out of it. And then you're like, oh, no, we can do that version. We'll do that version. It's great. It was the same thing with the Interrupters when they covered Billie Eilish's Bad Guy. All of a sudden, you have a version where bands can sit there and say, oh, so that's how you cover that song and that's how you get that in your set list. Also, Ever the Bridesmaid covers that version of Bad Guy, which is the superior version. No shade at Billie Eilish. The Interrupters just killed it.
Damn straight it is. Damn straight.
I mentioned it's a bit of a ballsy take to try to cover Chris Cornell. But even a ballsier take to try and cover Heart. But Lizzie Hale can do no wrong. Like, I really don't know of many other artists out there that can cover so many different genres with as much power as Lizzie Hale does. Even the 4 shows she did recently, singing lead for Skid Row, covering the early Sebastian Bach era, and slayed it. Lizzie Hale is one of the, yes, she's a go-to singer for many bands out there that are looking for a singer. I know she's even done vocals on a Lindsey Sterling song. Like, Lizzie Hale is in demand. But when you come out there and say, yeah, you think we're good now, wait till we cover Heart. Holy crap. Their cover of All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You. I would actually say I think I prefer the Halestorm version over the Heart version. And that's a bold statement, but holy crap, does Halestorm really kind of take a throne? And not really by changing it too much, because you didn't really need to change that song that much. But holy crap, Lizzie Hale is a vocal gymnast.
It's incredible. Every time I think that I have an idea going into a cover specifically of theirs, and we'll get into more later, but every time I click on a song, I'm like, I know this song, but I haven't heard their cover. I'm 30 seconds in and I'm impressed. Like, I don't know in my mind if there's a better band that goes so far out of their comfort zone, but just nails it almost every time.
There are bands who have kind of made covers a bit of a staple, or almost a calling card. Disturbed is one. So is Anthrax. Some of Anthrax's biggest songs are cover songs. Tesla's another one. We've covered both Anthrax and Tesla on this show. We'll get to Disturbed, I'm sure, at some point. But yeah, no, Halestorm, it's nice to hear, because sometimes when you dive into covers and you dive into different genres and different artists, it gives you a chance to explore different sounds, and that also helps in the songwriting. Case in point, The Strange Case of, released April 10th, 2012, hit number 15 on the Billboard 200 charts and number 7 on the US rock charts, and is platinum in the US. There were 5 singles off of this one. Freak Like Me hit number 1 on the US mainstream rock charts. Love Bites and I Miss the Misery both hit number 2. Now, cue the applause button, of which I'm not going to hit the applause button, but cue the applause button in your own mind. Love Bites, So Do I, won the 2013 Grammy for Best Hard Rock Metal Performance. They were the first female-fronted group to be nominated for the award. They were the first female-fronted group to win that award. Bravo, kudos to Halestorm. But now, off of a ridiculously tough album to pick off of, Carson, The Strange Case of, what's on your list?
I'm glad you said it, because this was the hardest decision out of all of them. And to preface, this is my favorite album. I think personally, this is the best album they've released to date. And it's perfection in my mind. And it's between 2. For me, it was between Mrs. Hyde and I Miss the Misery. And it's funny enough, because if you play the album just from top to finish, Mrs. Hyde blends so brilliantly into I Miss the Misery. But I did end up going with I Miss the Misery. And I think there's a little bit of nostalgia in there, because I remember that being absolutely pumped in the hockey locker room before a game. So there's that little bit of just, the past. It comes back to some good memories. But this is the album that when I think of Halestorm, I would show someone. If someone said, oh, I've never heard them before, I'm throwing this vinyl at their face. And it's just, it's perfection to me. This, like, when you told me that Halestorm was an episode you wanted to do, this was my most exciting part. And I Miss the Misery is just like, it's powerful, it's strong, it can be relatable depending on what you've been through. Like, it is absolutely the most power behind a song I have felt from Lizzie Hale and Halestorm as a band, and I wouldn't change a thing about it.
I need to talk about this album for a second here before I drop my pick. Miss the Misery, was not on my short list. But this is a daring album, though, because this album rocks hard at the beginning, rocks hard at the end. The deluxe edition has actually one of my favorite songs on here, Private Parts, their duet with James Michael from 6 a.m. But then you get to the middle of this album, and you have Break In Your Room, and Beautiful With You, kind of all back to back to back. And to slow it down like that. And I know Breakin' got a lot more attention during the pandemic because, of course, there was that duet version of Lizzie Hale and Amy Lee from Evanescence combining on that one. So that song got almost a second life 10, 11, 12 years after it was released. So that's awesome. But to have that kind of, I have occasionally mentioned albums as hamburgers, where you got the meat in the middle and then you get the buns, or you get the, the double down version, the KFC double down, where the buns are chicken and then you got the hamburger in the middle. This is kind of like the Oreo cookie of an album, where you got the hard exteriors, then you got the soft, cushy middle, but yet it works. It absolutely works.
100%. And an odd, I feel like, comparable for me is a lot of Green Day's albums do a very similar thing where they start off cranking, but Billie Joe Armstrong goes through that subtle, just soft intensity right through the middle. And I don't know why that came to mind in particular, but I feel like that's a solid comparable.
Yeah. I mean, you take a look at an album like Slave to the Grind, and I have to mention Skid Row because, of course, Lizzie Hale was a, temporary singer for them. There are 3 phenomenal, I guess, power ballads on there. You got Waste of Time, you've got In a Darkened Room, and Quicksand Jesus. Like, all 3 phenomenal songs, and Lizzie Hale killed Quicksand Jesus, but they're spread out throughout the album. Here, you're literally packaging this into like a little mellow middle, and I love it. But I have to go with Miss Hyde on this one because, that guitar tone, the vocals, the live vibe, and sometimes live changes your entire perception of a song, and every time Miss Hyde comes on, but yeah, Private Parts as well, like made this one a really tough choice. But Carrie, off of The Strange Case Of, what did you go with?
I'm going to grab my drink and I'm going to raise it high, because missing in this conversation of this fantastic album, and I agree with all of the points that it is front to back and highs and lows and the valley in between with all of the beautiful, Break-In lyrically, I freaking love this song, and it was on my short list. However, Here's to Us.
Yes.
This is without a doubt I've had a shit day, and everybody, because right now I just want to raise a drink, raise a glass, and just shoot the shit. And it literally speaks to, it's kind of like an anthem of, what? Okay, so you had a bad day, but there's always a tomorrow, and just hang in there, and, things will get better, whatever, right? It is such a beautiful song, and I'm not quite sure if it's because I really like pub music, Like, it's kind of like
a song like Closing Time, I could see kind of be compared to that.
I'd Walk 500 Miles.
Oh, yeah, okay, so the Proclaimers, yeah.
Kind of has that same kind of vibe of like, it starts melodic and it tells the story, and then it just kind of picks up. And it has that build and that intensity, and it's so brilliant. I love this song. Love it.
Yeah, it does.
Here's to Us.
It does really feel like the perfect way to close an album. And I love the way you kind of put that, like, literally it's the it all fanfare. It's really kind of how it feels. But yeah, no, like, Here's to Us. And that's the thing. That song works on so many different genres. Like, you could hear a rock band do it. You could hear a country band do it. You could hear a pop artist do it. And it would fit every single one of them.
And that's the sign of a brilliant one, too. Like, just a brilliant song, written, performed, everything. And I'm so glad Carrie had it on her list, because that was my number 3. And it's like all 3 of them in my top 3 were so tight. And it's such a, like, this album, I cannot rave about more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I could picture Carrie Underwood singing that song. I could picture Debbie Gibson singing that song. I could picture Lady Gaga singing that song. Like, really, you could picture anybody doing that song, and it would still work, because the song trumps any genre. It's covers times again. Reanimate 2.0, the covers EP, released October 15th, 2013, and peaked at number 5 on the U.S. hard rock charts. So, Kara, I'm going to go to you first. Covers EP time. What have you got?
I have to go with Shoot to Thrill. God, that voice. Oh my gosh. I actually feel like I prefer it better than the original. It was
damn
on
right
fire.
you do.
It was on fire.
I mean, so far we've talked about how ballsy it is to cover Chris Cornell, how ballsy it is to cover Heart. Now you're going to sit there and say, hold my beer after Here's to Us, because I'm going to cover frickin' AC/DC. Like, AC/DC songs, unless you're tuning down like a mofo, are hard as hell to sing, or if you're transposing it down a few steps. Like, it is tough. And having done AC/DC live, like, musically, AC/DC writes very accessible songs. They're easy to learn on guitar because they're not super complicated songs. But Brian Johnson's vocals makes it damn hard to pull off in any kind of way. Like, when they went on tour and Brian Johnson couldn't tour with them, they had to go get Axl Rose to go and, do that tour. I can only imagine what Lizzie Hale would sound like singing with AC/DC.
It's happened to Skid Row. It better happen. I mean, I was gonna say, if it better happens, that means something happened to Brian Johnson. But let's make sure that's not in the cards. But no, if there was something to happen with that band and somebody to slide in, like, you're damn straight, it better be Lizzie Hale.
I feel like Lizzie Hale is basically the replacement singer for everybody at this point, because there's nothing
she damn
can't
right
do.
should be. 100%.
All right, Carson, off of Reanimate 2.0, what's on your list?
Oh, it's Shoot to Thrill as well. Don't even confuse yourself. I'm looking around being like, where's Tony Stark? Where's Iron Man 4? Because get this in the damn soundtrack.
Right.
Because, oh my goodness, I've heard some AC/DC covers, and you said it perfectly, Jason, where they just lack that kind of that soul to it, that original character that made the song great. And I got about a minute into this one, and I'm like, holy shit, she's absolutely killing it. Like, she's just shredding it. And this, I'm with Carrie, where I'm like, this actually might be my preferred version because it's that clean. Like, it's that crisp. It's incredible.
I feel like I stand alone on this one because I'm not going to Shoot to Thrill. My short list is one song, and that's 1996, because I'm not the biggest Marilyn Manson fan, but she actually made this song really sound good. But I'm going with a song that actually used to be in the Ever the Bridesmaid set list, and that's Get Lucky. And I say
knew
this,
it.
Right?
I knew it. I actually I shortlisted it, and I wrote the guitar. Wow.
Right. I mean, this is one of those songs where, as a rock band, you're looking to cover something, you're like, how the hell are we going to do Daft Punk in our set list when we don't have keyboards, we don't have samples? Oh, by the way, Halestorm did a cover of it, and it slays. Absolutely slays. Like, this is better than Daft Punk could even Daft Punk, it feels like at times. But I mean, that's coming from someone who listens to rock religiously. I will give Daft Punk full credit. The Tron Legacy soundtrack is untouchable. They are phenomenal doing that. But Get Lucky made this song doable as a band. And that's really cool. Like, to be able to take something that is completely opposite of everything you've done up until this point, and you're like, all right, well, yeah, we could do AC/DC. Yeah, it's good rock. Yeah, we could do Marilyn Manson. Why not? Let's freaking do Daft Punk. Because why not? We're Halestorm. We can do whatever the heck we want. Into the Wildlife, released April 10th, 2015, hit number 1 on the US rock charts and number 5 on the Billboard 200. There were 5 singles off of this one. Apocalyptic and Amen both hit number 31 on the US mainstream rock charts. This one, it's got to be hard coming off of a Grammy-winning album. And then it's like, okay, cool, do it again. Do it again. But again, there are some phenomenal songs off this one, but I had to go with Apocalyptic. Like, this is a barroom banger of everything that's on here. And that's not to say that there aren't good songs on, but holy crap, Apocalyptic. Again, you could picture a rock band doing it, you could picture a country band doing it, and it would still kick ass. But Carrie, off of Into the Wildlife, what did you go with?
I'm seeing a pattern here. I seem to go with the more melodic, like, beautiful songs. And without a doubt, Dear Daughter it just stood out to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, the album rocks. I mean, Mayhem, come on, the build up on that song, Sick Individual. Those were my short list, but I have to go with Dear Daughter just because it is so damn pretty.
I love the fact that you actually listed 2 of the 3 songs on my short list.
Nice.
The third one, though, for me, and this is the one that really made it tough, because yes, I picked the barroom banger, but What Sober Couldn't Say really made this a tough choice. Like, I love that song. I love what they did with the instrumentation. Lizzie Hale's voice on it is almost soulful, but it was hard to not pick Apocalyptic. I mean, who knows? By the end of the show, I might actually switch my pick, because What Sober Couldn't Say was really fighting for it. But Carson, what did you go with off of this?
So I'm surprised none of you have brought it up, but I went with Amen, which is, I feel like, an interesting kind of separation from what I would have usually picked, especially coming from Halestorm, but it still holds what I love about them. And that's that strong vocal backing, that strong guitar, but also the storyline interwoven that calms things down. And I thought this was a perfect example of that. But I did say also that this album isn't as strong as The Strange Case of, which you already prefaced as, like, that's nearly impossible to build off of in terms of back-to-back album success. But man, oh man, this was also one of the first albums that I got introduced to from Halestorm in 2015. I remember this coming out, and the reason I knew about it was because my favorite singer, still to this day, is Eric Church. And during the CMAs of 2015, he brought Lizzie Hale out to do a duet with her for one of his songs called That's Damn Rock and Roll. And if you want to hear a southerny blues country song mixed with arguably the best female lead singer in rock, then you got to go check it out. It's on YouTube. The quality isn't brilliant, but you get the gist. And that's actually what hooked me on Halestorm, on Lizzie Hale. And this was one of my first introductory albums. So Amen does hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, this is when they kind of changed up, I think, the recording process a little bit, and they did dabble in some more, for lack of a better term, Nashville kind of vibes when it came to the writing and the recording process of it. And it really did kind of shine through in this. And it kind of separates it a bit from The Strange Case of. And that's the thing. As much as you want to replicate the success of a Grammy-winning album, you also don't want to be accused of trying to replicate a Grammy-winning album, because you do want to set yourself apart, songwriting-wise. And I think that's also where, the covers EPs really come into play, where it's like, okay, cool, yeah, we did this. Yeah, and we also covered Daft Punk. But now we're going to go to Nashville and, let that kind of influence the songwriting. But it works. And there have been a number of stories of artists going to Nashville and, just soaking in the vibes there. Because you have to imagine, just being in Nashville and being surrounded by that vibe, it's got to have an influence no matter what kind of artist you are. Moving on to one more covers EP, Reanimate 3.0, released January 6, 2017, and hit number 1 on the US hard rock charts. This one was probably my least favorite of the covers EPs, but there's still some good stuff on there. But once again, if you're going to sit there and say, yeah, Chris Cornell's a great singer, but hold my beer, Fell on Black Days. This actually is one of my favorite Soundgarden songs to begin with. And then they come in and do this. I mean, it fits them instrumentally. It fits Lizzie Hale's voice. Well, let's be honest, everything fits Lizzie Hale's voice. And if I feel like I'm gushing, it's because Lizzie Hale's a phenomenal singer. If you have not seen her live, you're missing out. But yeah, Fell on Black Days is definitely my choice. Carson, what have you got off this?
So the first preface I have is I was a big Guitar Hero nerd growing up. Loved it. Was always playing with my buddies. And for that reason, just for the nostalgia of Guitar Hero 2, Ride the Lightning, damn right, is it the best song on this album. And she fits into Metallica's vibe brilliantly. She has a little bit of change in the way and the inflections of the entire song. And it's just, every time that they do a cover, it impresses me. But you're absolutely right. This is personally, in my opinion, the weakest of the three. Not to say it's even remotely bad, but it's absolutely not as good as the other two. And that's okay, because there's still some bangers on that. Ride the Lightning does so well on building upon, I feel, the covers that they've done in the past, especially the 1.0, 2.0. It adds to it. But in my opinion, it's also the most punch from this album, which I still want from Halestorm.
I can see that. And the thing is too, like when we say it's the probably our least favorites of the covers EPs, that's because 1.0 and 2.0 like were game changers. So
Chef's kiss.
Exactly. So you're talking about, you know, the least fragrant rose in the bouquet. Like they're all roses, but this is the least fragrant. Carrie, Reanimate 3.0. What'd you go with?
Can I just say I agree with both of you? I absolutely loved both songs, but I did inevitably, I agree with Carson. I Ride the Lightning.
Yes, sir.
Ride the Lightning. I mean, dare I say it? I'm not here to knock Metallica, but damn, it gave the original a run for its money.
Right?
Yeah.
And off of my personal favorite Metallica album, especially of the classic era, like the Ride the Lightning album doesn't get the kudos like Master of Puppets does, or like the Black Album does, or maybe like Injustice for All, but holy crap, Ride the Lightning was front to back for me. I will say too, Still of the Night, their cover of the Whitesnake song, having seen that one live when Halestorm was touring with Lita Ford and Dorothy, that song really comes across better live than it did on disc. Phenomenal Whitesnake song to cover. We now move on to 2018 and the release of Vicious, released July 27th of that year. Hit number 1 on the US rock charts and number 8 on the Billboard 200. There were 4 singles off of this one. Uncomfortable hit number 1 on the mainstream rock charts. It was also nominated at the 2019 Grammys for Best Rock Performance, but lost posthumously to Chris Cornell for When Bad Does Good, which can't really blame them because it's Chris Cornell. Carson, off of Vicious, what's your pick?
I apparently just stuck to the top of that list, which is Uncomfortable. For me, it was kind of the upgrade they needed at this point in time, especially after building off of The Strange Case of going into the wildlife. This is kind of, I feel like, that little bit of change they needed. And you could hear almost a modernizing in their genre of hard rock. You almost see that transition from mid to early, late, I'll say the 2000s, from 01 to 09. You really hear that old school hard rock in their previous albums. And this is the first time I think, okay, so we've reached more of a modern era. And I just think Uncomfortable does the best job out of showcasing that while keeping the sound and their heritage as a band.
All right, Carrie, off of Vicious, what did you go with?
Ooh, can I just say that I'm feeling mighty uncomfortable now because I know this is going to be a very unpopular statement, but this album wasn't one of my favorites. I had to listen to it several times because I knew that I had to pick a song. But it was really a struggle. And I think, I'm not quite sure if it's because they were coming from such a high, with The Strange Case of and Into the Wildlife. For me, it was, I don't know. I'm just going to put it out there. I was conflicted. And that's the song that I picked. And I liked this one out of all of them because it had more of a No Doubt vibe. It was kind of a little bit more boppy. But I found overall the entire album was really a challenge for me to pick. Like there wasn't much of a standout on this. It was kind of an even keel listen.
I don't disagree with that. But again, you're talking about albums like the self-titled and The Strange Case of, and even Into the Wildlife that are front to back phenomenal game changer albums. Like they really opened up kind of the world, especially for female led rock bands to rock harder than the guys. Like honestly, they have done so much in so short a span of time, from 2009 to at this point 2018, that it makes sense. It does make sense that not every album is going to hit. Vicious is a slightly little bit of a harder album to get into than something like The Strange Case of. There is still some good stuff on there. Do Not Disturb and Killing Ourselves to Live both made my short list. But for once, I'm going with the quiet song. I'm going with the silence. I mentioned earlier in talking about Break In, how it got that extra that extra go around thanks to the duet with Amy Lee. But it reminded everyone just how good Lizzie Hale is with a ballad and an acoustic feel. And the silence really showcases it off of this one in a phenomenal way to land the plane at the end of the album is a bit of a soft landing. I love when bands do that. There's different ways to go about ending your album. It's got to be a hard sell, right? Start off the album with something really banging and hard hitting and all that, but how do you end the album? And there are some bands that really take a shining to landing the plane softly. Queensryche is very much known for that, ending Empire, of course, with Anybody Listening, ending Promised Land with Someone Else. The silence landed the plane so softly for this album, and I think was a great way to end it.
I can definitely appreciate that. And I think a good way to sum up this album, if I were to use a movie term, which we're not totally foreign to on this podcast.
We've talked about a few.
Right, just a tad, is it's a little bit of sequelitis in my mind. I think that's what it comes down to. Just like, you know what? You had one perfection, in my opinion, and one other really solid performance. This one it didn't meet the standard, and that's okay.
This is the Godfather 3 of Halestorm and The Strange Case of our Godfathers 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's a perfect representation.
I just have to say, though, I wonder if, because I'm looking at the timing of this album, so if it was released in 2018, I realize that we would have never seen these songs live. The previous releases...
oh, no, we did. Not these ones, no.
No, but what I'm saying is, I think it's when you can experience a song live and then that sticks in your memory, whereas this was more newer, unreleased material to us as opposed to we've seen it live. So maybe, I guess where I'm going with this, I'm truly hoping that some of the songs make it into the set list when we see them. Is it next month, I think?
Yeah, no.
It's coming up.
We're going to be seeing them when they come to Toronto with I Prevail. So, if you want us to pick your set list, we'd be very happy to. That'd be kind of fun.
I'm so jealous of you guys. Like, that's going to be a hell of a time. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I'm just trying to mentally justify to myself how I can also justify going to see them with Evanescence in the Warning, because that would be a phenomenal tour as well.
Just back to back.
Not that I'm being jealous. I would like to be jealous, but not that I'm being jealous. But here we go. Or greedy, as the case may be, because I could literally see Halestorm play more times than I care to count, and it still wouldn't be enough because they do have such a deep discography.
But can I just point out, remember in London?
Oh, yes.
When we brought our youngest son.
Ontario, not UK.
And wow, did she not literally have our youngest mind blown? Literally you could see his brain exploding in front of us. She would hit a note and sustain it for minutes. It was incredible. And I remember looking over at him and just the look on his face, just like he was not just listening to the music, but he was feeling the music.
That's the thing. Lizzie Hale live, if you ever had the chance to witness it, you are really struck with just how powerful she is with the microphone. She doesn't hold back. There's no, she's not pulling the Kawhi Leonard and, and doing rest days kind of thing. No. Every live performance is a championship game for Lizzie Hale. And it's proof of what you can do as a singer live. Not everyone can be that powerful and that strong for as long as they tour, and they tour a ton. Lizzie Hale's voice, I'm often surprised how she hasn't blown her voice out.
I was just about to say, I pray for those vocal cords.
Yeah. There's going to come a day, when she's 60, 70, 80 years old, looking back on things and just holding up signs saying, I can no longer speak. That's pretty much it. It's going to be like Wile E. Coyote.
It's going to be it was worth it. We're sorry for your loss, but it was worth it for us.
Oh, it was worth it for the fans too, because holy crap, phenomenal. We now get to our final album on our journey, Back from the Dead, released May 6, 2022, peaked at number 4 on the US rock charts. There were 4 singles off of this one, Back from the Dead and Steeple, both hit number 1 on the hard rock charts. So Carson, last song on the list, what have you got off of Back from the Dead?
So this is probably the most, I feel like, out of pocket song that I've chosen. And that's Terrible Things featuring Ashley McBryde. There's something about this song that I really, really connect to on not only an emotional level, but just on a tune and being present with the song. And Ashley McBryde's musical ability, I feel like, really enhances what the two of them did together. And for me, it's almost like not a new direction, but just a more finite direction. And it reminds me a lot of actually their first 3 albums in terms of lyrics. When you go back and I kind of looked at the first 3 from 97 to 01, and there's some similar themes. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, I don't know. But it was almost a call to the future while also remembering their heritage. And I thought it was a really, really beautiful piece to kind of round out all the albums we've gone through.
Oh, and it's funny enough because it's actually my choice as well. Again, it's another acoustic song similar to The Silence where it just kind of soars. But it is one of the few songs on here that is not just Lzzy Hale and Scott Stevens writing, because Zach Malloy from the Nixons is credited as a writer on this song. And we have talked about the Nixons on this show before, and the Nixons are one of my favorite bands of all time. Zach Malloy is one of my favorite songwriters of all time. So to see Zach Malloy working with Halestorm, you're like kid in a candy shop at this point. You have like phenomenal band, phenomenal songwriting, all combined into one. I would love to see Halestorm tour headline, but bring the Nixons out on tour with you, because the Nixons are another one of those bands that needs to be seen live because they're phenomenal. Carrie, off of Back from the Dead, what'd you go with?
In an interesting twist, I'm going with the heavier Raise Your Horns.
Ooh, another good one. And another phenomenal way to end the album. And that's the thing, too. You got to know how to land that plane. And, holy crap, does Halestorm know? Like, their set order, or their at least song order on their albums, clearly is well thought out. And Raise Your Horns is definitely enough encouragement for you to, for lack of a better term, flip the record over. All right, so now we get to the hard part here of our Halestorm journey. So, Carrie, I'm going to start with you on this one. Please remind our listeners what songs made your list, and if there can only be one Halestorm song, what's it going to be?
Okay, well, going back to 1997, I chose Why off of their very first Forecast for the Future cassette. And then in 1999, Don't Mess with the Time, Man, I picked No Clue. From Breaking the Silence, my selection was Rose in December. And from their self-titled album from 2009, I picked Familiar Taste of Poison. From their first covers EP, Reanimate, I chose Hunger Strike. And from The Strange Case of, without a doubt, I chose Here's to Us. From Reanimate 2.0, the second of the covers EPs, I chose Shoot to Thrill. And Into the Wildlife, I chose Dear Daughter. From Reanimate 3.0, the very third covers album, or EP, it was without a doubt Ride the Lightning. And from Vicious, I was conflicted. And then from Back from the Dead, I chose Raise Your Horns. That's a lot of albums. That is a huge discography. And my only one is a no-brainer. It is Here's to Us.
All right, Carson.
I can respect that greatly. Like, I just, I get it. From 97, Forecast of the Future, I went with Love is Power. From 99's Don't Mess with the Time Man, I went with the Time Man. I'm messing with him. From 2001, Breaking the Silence, I went Unbreakable Promises. From 09's self-titled Halestorm, I went with the basic I Get Off, but the beautiful, obviously. From 2011's the covers 1.0, I'll call it, the original, I went with Lady Gaga's Bad Romance. From The Strange Case of, the best album in my opinion, I gotta go with I Miss the Misery. It's such a toss-up, but it had to be for me. From Reanimate 2.0, I also went with Shoot to Thrill. Move over, Brian Johnson, because you got competition, big guy. Into the Wild in 2015, I went with Amen. From 2017's Reanimate 3.0, I went with Ride the Lightning. Vicious's 2018, Uncomfortable, and then to round things out with a nice little bow, with Back from the Dead, I went with Terrible Things.
And if there can only be one Halestorm song, oh, what's it gonna be?
Oh, it's gotta be I Miss the Misery. It's the song that introduced me to everything. It's the song that has easily been the most bopped to in my life. It may be a little cliche, maybe a little basic, but that it sums up the band for me. It sums up what Lizzie Hale can do, and it's perfection in my mind.
All right, and a reminder, dear listeners, that if you want to hear the songs that we are talking about, you can go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. Go to the There Can Only Be One show page, click on the episode page for this episode, and you will see the Spotify playlist from Carson, Carrie, and myself. On my playlist, from 1997's Forecast for the Future, I went with Light in the Dark. From Don't Mess with the Time Man, I went with No Clue. From Breaking the Silence, I went with Unbreakable Promises. Off of the self-titled album, I went with Better Sorry Than Safe. Off of Reanimate, the covers EP, I went with All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You. From The Strange Case of, I went with Mrs. Hyde. From Reanimate 2.0, the Reanimating. Can we do that? Possibly. Electric Boogaloo, maybe? Electric Coverloo, maybe? I went with Get Lucky. From Into the Wildlife, I went with Apocalyptic, although, what Sober Couldn't Say made it tough. From Reanimate 3.0, I went with Fell on Black Days. From Vicious, I went with The Silence. And from Back from the Dead, I went with Terrible Things. But I'm going to go all the way back to 2009 for my pick, and I'm going to go with Better Sorry Than Safe. And again, it's one of those songs where I am dying to hear this song live. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Halestorm. You know what you have to do. All right, Carson, please remind our listeners out there what you're up to and where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
You can find me at Carson Elk, ELC12 on X. And in a few short weeks, I will be blessing the airwaves on Sportsnet 960, The Fan.
All right. And Carrie, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Now to you, our listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is an artist out there that you want us to cover on There Can Only Be One, hit us up on social media at OnlyOneCast or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out our Coming Soon page and go to the episode page and let us know what songs would have made your list if you had to go through the Halestorm discography. We really want to hear from you guys.
If it's Shoot to Thrill or if it's not Shoot to Thrill, we don't want to hear from you. Don't comment.
If you don't agree with any of us, keep it to yourself. No, I'm kidding. If you don't agree with us, we also want to hear from you.
Yeah, obviously.
Absolutely.
Making the best conversation.
Exactly.
Please disagree with us.
Exactly. But do it nicely. Just do it nicely.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Be a gentleman.
Until next time, he's Carson, she's Carrie, I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is There Can Only Be One, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.